know that feeling when you've spent hours studying English, you've memorized grammar rules, learned perfect sentences from a book, and then you step into a real conversation with a native speaker, and it's like, well, it feels like they're speaking a totally different language.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really common disconnect learner's experience.
Yeah, the words might be familiar, but the rhythm, the little shortcuts, the way they actually use those words, it just doesn't always match the textbook.
Exactly. Textbooks give you that essential foundation, the grammar, the core vocabulary, those clear structures, which you need.
Right.
But spoken language, especially in everyday sort of casual settings, it's far more fluid,
Yeah.
full of nuances, and often surprisingly indirect compared to what you might first learn.
That's exactly. And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We've looked at a whole stack of material that really digs into how native English speakers actually handle those fundamental initial interactions.
Yeah, the real nuts and bolts of starting a conversation.
We're talking about the bedrock stuff. Saying hello, asking about someone's life, just getting to know them.
And our goal is to move beyond just the textbook answers and uncover the natural, the really commonly used phrases for these situations.
Right.
It's not just about giving you, the listener, new words, but helping you understand the kind of underlying social logic, the intuition, that makes you sound less like you're reciting something.
Yeah, less robotic.
And more like you're genuinely connecting with someone.
We really want to extract those key nuggets, explain why they work, and maybe give you a bit of a shortcut to sounding more natural and feeling more confident. We'll tackle everything from, the real scoop on greetings, how people actually ask about jobs and hobbies.
Which can be quite different.
Definitely. And navigating questions about where someone's from or lives, and even those slightly awkward moments like asking for a name you've totally forgotten,
Happens to the best of us.
or figuring out the best way to stay in touch.
Think of this as getting the kind of insider's guide to the first 5 minutes of meeting someone in English.
Okay, so if you're ready to bridge that gap between classroom English and real-world conversation, let's dive in.
Sounds good.
And where else to start? At the very beginning, saying hello.
Let's unpack it. Beyond the classic, how are you?
Right. So pretty much the first thing you learn is, how are you? Paired with the classic answer, I'm fine.
The standard textbook opening.
And look, there's nothing grammatically wrong with that. It's perfectly polite, it's understandable, you can use it.
Oh, for sure. And in maybe slightly more formal situations, or if you're just feeling a bit cautious, it absolutely works. It serves its purpose.
However, and this is the big however step into a casual conversation, especially, say, in the United States. And you'll hear alternatives far more frequently. These are the phrases that signal a more relaxed, sort of everyday interaction.
That's right. They set a different tone.
The two big ones you hear everywhere are, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, very common.
And what's up?
Also extremely common. So, hey, how's it going? It's incredibly common. It functions essentially the same way as, how are you? It's a pleasantry, a way to initiate contact.
Okay.
It's pretty versatile, widely accepted in most casual to semi-casual settings.
Now, what's up? That one feels even more casual, maybe a bit quicker.
What's up is definitely on the more casual end of the spectrum, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very frequent, especially maybe among friends or people meeting in really relaxed environments. It's just concise and effective.
Okay, now here's a really crucial point where the textbook answers completely diverge from reality.
Yes, this is a key difference.
If someone asks you, how's it going? The natural common responses aren't, I'm fine.
Right.
If you reply, I'm fine to how's it going, it sounds a bit off, doesn't it? A bit unnatural to a native ear.
It really does. That distinction is subtle, but it's important for sounding fluent. While I'm fine is the standard reply to how are you, it simply isn't the conventional response, the expected response to how's it going.
So what are the expected responses then?
The phrases that pair naturally with how's it going are things like good,
Just good.
yeah, or pretty good, or not bad.
Okay. Good, pretty good, not bad.
These all basically convey that you're doing okay, things are fine, you're functioning effectively, but the key thing is they are the expected sort of conversational handshake for that particular question.
Okay, so the big takeaway for how's it going is stick to good, pretty good, or not bad. Never I'm fine. Simple rule, but it sounds like it has a big impact on sounding natural.
It really does. It's one of those small things that signals you get the flow.
Now, what if you're genuinely not doing well? Can you say that?
You certainly can. If you're not having a good day, you can say so. Common negative responses include things like not so good, or not great, or maybe not so well.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
There is. Be aware that using one of these negative responses implies you're probably willing to elaborate a bit.
Ah, right.
The person asking will almost certainly follow up with something like, oh no, why? Or what's wrong?
So you need to be ready for that follow-up question.
Exactly. Only answer negatively if you're actually prepared to share a few more details about your situation. It kind of signals an openness to talk about it.
That makes total sense. It's
Yeah.
like a genuine invitation to talk about what's actually happening rather than just the politeness ritual.
Precisely.
All right, shifting gears to what's up. The most frequent kind of cheerful replies you'll hear are not much or nothing much.
Yes, not much or nothing much are the standard, very lighthearted responses to what's up.
What do they actually mean, though?
Well, by saying this, you're essentially indicating that you don't have anything particularly pressing or unusual happening right now.
Okay.
And importantly, it implies that you are free and available to chat. It sort of clears the decks for a conversation.
Ah, okay. So it's like saying, yeah, I'm free. What's going on?
Kind of, yeah. It signals you're not busy or preoccupied.
And this is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit of a game changer for learners, I think. Sometimes when someone says, what's up, they're not even really asking for information about your day.
Exactly. This is key. What's up is very, very frequently used as simply another way to say hello.
Just hello?
Yes, it's just a greeting, not a literal inquiry into your current state or activities.
Wow, so it's often just a casual synonym for hi. That totally changes how you should process it, doesn't it?
It does.
You don't need to desperately rack your brain thinking of something interesting you're doing right that second.
Precisely. You can relax. And carrying that idea even further, sometimes when someone says, what's up to you?
Yeah,
The most natural response is to just say, what's up, right back to them.
really. Just mirror it.
Yeah. It just becomes a mutual acknowledgement, like a verbal nod, rather than a strict question and answer exchange.
Huh. That's fascinating. It really highlights the underlying principle here, doesn't it? That these common greetings, how are you, how's it going, what's up?
Yeah.
They're often less about getting an actual factual update on someone's well-being
Right. Much less.
and much more about fulfilling a kind of social ritual. They're conversational starters, ways to acknowledge someone and just open the channel for interaction.
Understanding that really shifts your focus as a learner. You stop trying to provide a literal, detailed status report about your health or your activities.
Which can feel stressful.
And you start seeing these greetings as more of a social entry point. It's about engaging in the ritual, using the expected phrases, and then just being ready for the conversation that might follow.
It takes the pressure off. Okay, so we've mastered the art of the casual greeting. Phew. Once you've said hello, what's often the next thing people are curious about?
And usually what you do with your time, right?
Yeah, often.
Specifically, maybe what you do for work.
Which brings us neatly to how people ask about jobs naturally.
And here we go again. Another place where the most obvious grammatically correct question, straight from the textbook, kind of falls flat.
It really does.
Asking what is your job? While perfectly understandable, it just sounds quite direct, doesn't it? Almost abrupt or impersonal in most casual social settings among native speakers.
Yeah, abrupt is a good word. You might see that exact phrase on like an official form you're filling out.
Right, like immigration or something.
Exactly. Or maybe in a very, very formal interview context. But it's just not the language of meeting someone at a party or in a coffee shop or even at a relatively informal work gathering. It lacks that conversational ease.
It sounds a bit like an interrogation.
A little bit, yeah.
So what's the go-to alternative? It's that simple yet potentially confusing question, what do you do?
What do you do?
That's it.
It's the ubiquitous, polite, and entirely natural way to inquire about someone's profession or occupation and stay into a conversation.
And the trick here is understanding that this is actually a shortened version of something longer, right? It sort of implies, what do you do for a living? Correct. The question, what do you do, stands in for that fuller idea, what do you do for a living? Making it clear you're asking about their work, their occupation, their career path.
Now, this question, what do you do, sounds incredibly similar to another question that has a totally different meaning.
Yes.
This is a point that can really, really trip learners up. The difference between what are you doing and what do you do?
This is such a crucial distinction to really get what are you doing? Notice that ing sound at the end is a question about the immediate present.
Right now.
Exactly. It asks us about the action you are performing right now at this specific moment in time.
So if someone walks into the room and sees you, I don't know, holding a phone, they might ask, what are you doing? And you'd reply with an ing verb like, I'm texting, or I'm just scrolling through news, or I'm watching a video.
Yeah.
It's about your current activity.
Exactly right. In sharp contrast, what do you do without that ing is about your general occupation.
Your job.
Your job, your profession, the work you habitually do. It's a question about your identity in a professional sense, not about your real-time action at that moment.
And there's a fantastic auditory cue, a listening tip you can use to help distinguish these two, especially when people speak quickly.
Yes, this is really helpful.
The tip is to really listen for that ing sound at the very end of the question.
That's right. Even if the question is spoken quickly or maybe casually slurred a bit, that ing ending on doing is often still audible.
So if you hear that ing,
If you hear that sound, you know they're asking about your current immediate action. What are you doing?
okay.
If you don't hear that ing sound, and the question sounds more like, what do you do? Or what do you do, me?
It often gets shortened like that.
You can be pretty confident they're asking about your knob. It's a simple but really powerful listening strategy.
That's a great tip. Listen for the ing. Okay, so we know how to ask, what do you do? Naturally. How do you answer? What are the common ways to tell someone your job?
Well, the most direct and probably most common way is simply stating your job title.
Like,
I am a Mary Could,
Right.
or I'm a teacher, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a graphic designer.
simple enough. You can also mention the place where you work, right? That gives a bit more context.
Yes, that's another frequent way to answer. I work at place, for example. I work at a hospital, or I work at a software company, or I work at a local restaurant. It describes your work environment.
And for really big, well-known companies, people often just state the company name itself.
Exactly. If you work for a big, recognizable organization, saying, I work for company name is very common and often tells the listener a lot.
Examples.
Like, I work for Google, or I work for Toyota, or I work for the New York Times. The company name itself carries a lot of information.
Got it. And once someone tells you what they do, it's always a good idea to, well, to follow up politely, isn't it? Show some interest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A polite and engaged response shows you're actually listening and interested. Simple phrases work well. Oh, really? Or how interesting. Maybe that sounds fascinating. Or, oh, that must be challenging. Something like that.
The key is to sound sincere, I suppose.
Definitely. Sound sincere and encouraging. It keeps the conversation focused on them for a moment, which people generally appreciate. It keeps the ball rolling.
Makes it feel like a real conversation, not just ticking boxes in an interview.
Exactly.
Speaking of interesting things people do, let's talk about what fills their time outside of work. Their free time activities, or, dare I say the word, hobbies.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about that word, hobby.
Yeah, because, again, the textbook often teaches questions like, do you have any hobbies?
Or what are your hobbies?
Standard textbook fare.
But the reality is, native speakers, especially in casual chat, almost never use that word hobbies, do they?
It's really quite rare in natural conversation. Asking about hobbies directly feels a bit stiff, a little formal perhaps.
Yeah, like you're filling out a profile or something. Exactly. It's like the word itself carries this connotation of a list-like categorization rather than just spontaneous enjoyment. It doesn't sound very relaxed.
So what are the natural ways? How do you ask about what someone does for fun without sounding like a textbook?
Well, the most common and natural alternative is simply, what do you do for fun?
What do you do for fun? Straightforward.
Yeah, it's friendly, it's open-ended, and it directly asks about enjoyable activities. It's definitely the standard phrase you'll hear most often.
Is there another common variation?
Yes. Another one you might hear is, what do you do in your free time?
Okay, what do you do in your free time? Also sounds perfectly natural.
It is. And it clearly specifies the context time outside of work or other obligations. Both are great options.
Okay, so we've got, what do you do for fun? And what do you do in your free time? How do you answer these questions naturally?
The most common structure is using like. So I like to verb, or I like verbing. Both forms are widely used and perfectly acceptable.
So if you enjoy, say, hiking, you could say, I like to hike, or I like hiking.
Exactly.
If you're into painting, I like to paint, or I like painting.
Precisely. You just choose the verb describing the activity, and use either the infinitive form to hike or the gerund, the umming form, hiking, after I like. People use them pretty interchangeably.
Can you add a bit more nuance, like how much you like something?
Oh, definitely. To show a really strong preference, you can add really. I really like playing guitar, or I really like going to the movies.
And what if it's something you're maybe less enthusiastic about, or just do occasionally?
Then you can use kind of.
Okay.
Like, I kind of like gardening implies maybe you dabble in it or enjoy it sometimes, but it's not your main passion. Or I kind of like playing tennis.
That's useful for expressing those subtle differences. What if you don't really have one specific, well-defined hobby in the traditional sense? Or maybe you just do a variety of things and don't want to list them all out.
There's a fantastic, very natural phrase for this exact situation. It's incredibly common in casual speech.
Which is?
I like hanging out with my friends and stuff like that.
And stuff like that. That phrase is gold. It's like a conversational ellipsis, isn't it?
It really is. It's so useful. The structure is simple. You start with I like, then you mention one or two common, maybe general activities you enjoy.
Like
hanging out with my friends, or maybe watching movies or reading.
Okay.
And then you just add that useful catch-all phrase and stuff like that.
So you could say, oh, what do I do for fun? I like reading, watching movies, and stuff like that.
Perfect. Or I usually just relax at home, maybe listen to music and stuff like that.
It works perfectly.
It does. And stuff like that allows you to be general without having to list every single minor thing you do in your free time. It implies there are other similar casual activities you enjoy. It's a very relaxed and very common way to answer in a social setting.
It feels much less rigid than trying to define a specific hobby. It sounds more like just talking about your actual life.
Exactly. It's more natural.
Okay, so moving on from what you do for fun.
Yeah.
Let's talk about where you come from and where you live now. These seem straightforward, but there are definitely some nuances, particularly with the first one.
There are, yeah, particularly with where are you from. It's not always as simple as it looks.
Right. Where are you from can mean different things depending on who is asking and who they're asking. It's not always just about what country you're from.
Absolutely. Now, if you are clearly, visibly, perhaps, not from the same country as the person asking, it will almost certainly mean what country are you from. That's the default assumption.
Makes sense.
However, when Americans ask this question of other Americans, they are usually trying to find out what part of the United States you are from.
Okay, so not which country, but which region or state.
Exactly. What city or state, or even a specific region like the Midwest, the South, the East Coast, the West Coast.
So if one American asks another, where are you from? The answer might be something like, I'm from Texas, or I'm from Chicago, rather than, I'm from the U.S., which would obviously be redundant in that context.
Precisely. It's a way to geographically place someone within the country, and it often opens the door to conversations about regional differences, or local culture, or sports teams, or landmarks.
It finds common ground within the U.S. context.
Yeah.
So how do you answer, where are you from? More broadly then, covering both international and domestic situations.
You have a few main options. You can state your nationality. I'm nationality.
Like I'm Korean, or I'm Mexican.
Yes. Or you can state your country directly using from.
I'm from country.
I'm from Brazil, or I'm from Germany, I'm from Italy, I'm from Thailand. That's very common.
And what if you're from a really famous city? Can you just use the city?
Yes. If the city is globally recognizable, think Paris, Tokyo, Cairo, London, New Delhi, you might just say, I'm from city.
Like I'm from Tokyo, or I'm from Beijing.
Right. People will generally know where that is, so the city name is often enough.
You also sometimes hear a casual shortened version of where you're from, don't you? Like with words dropped.
Oh, very commonly in informal speech, yes. The R is often omitted, and people just say, where are you from?
Where you from? Just like that.
Yep. Hey, where are you from? It's very relaxed and a widely used variation in casual chat.
Good to know.
Yeah?
Where are you from? For casual situations. The material also discussed a more indirect way of asking this, especially maybe in very multicultural places.
Yes, this is a thoughtful approach, quite polite, to avoid making potentially awkward assumptions about someone's background, especially in a really diverse area like London or New York.
Yeah.
People might ask if you are from the specific place where you are currently meeting.
So if you're both in London, someone might ask,
Are you from London? Or if you're in New York, are you from New York? Keeps it local initially.
That is polite. It avoids guessing wrong. How do you answer that if you're not actually from that place?
It's simple. You just start with no, and then give your standard answer about where you are from.
So if someone in London asks, "Are you from London?" and you're, say, Spanish?
You'd say, no, I'm Spanish, or no, I'm from Spain.
Or, "No, I'm from Russia," or, "No, I'm French."
Exactly. It clarifies your origin without making the other person feel awkward for asking the initial local question.
That makes sense. There was also a cultural insight mentioned about Americans and their regions, which is quite interesting.
Yes, it's worth noting because the U.S. is so geographically vast and culturally diverse internally. Americans often have quite a strong regional identity.
So mentioning a state or a region.
Mentioning a state like California or Texas, or a region like the West Coast or the South, isn't just stating a location, it often carries cultural connotations.
Right.
And it often signals a willingness, even an interest, in discussing those regional differences or local culture or food, or even friendly rivalries between regions.
So it's an invitation to talk more about that specific part of the country.
That's good context. Okay, so after you've maybe talked about where you're originally from, a very natural follow-up question is usually, where do you live?
Yes, that's a very common progression in getting to know you conversations. Once you have a sense of someone's background or origin, asking where they currently live is a logical next step.
And it's another opportunity to find common ground.
Absolutely. Maybe you live in the same area or know the area they live in. And how you answer this depends a lot on the local context, doesn't it? There isn't just one single way.
Exactly. The way you describe where you live is often relative to the area you are currently in, or based on common points of reference that the other person might know.
What are some common methods?
Well, one way is referencing a known neighborhood or area name. You might say, do you know area name? I live there.
Like, do you know the Capitol Hill area? I live near there.
Exactly. Or you might use a well-known local landmark.
How would that sound?
You could say, I live near the landmark, like I live near the big library downtown, or I live near the Opera House, or near that big park on the west side.
Okay, using landmarks. And in cities with good public transport, people often use that as a reference, right?
Absolutely, that's very common. Many people describe their location by the nearest train station or the specific line they live on.
Examples.
I live near Central Station, or I live out on the Green Line, or just off the number 15 bus route. The key is always to use references that the other person is likely to understand within that local context.
Lots of possibilities depending on the place. What kind of responses might you get when you tell someone where you live?
Well, they might show recognition, right? Oh yeah, I know that area. Or, oh, I've been there a few times.
Or maybe they even live nearby.
That's always a good connection point. Oh, really? I live near there too.
If they don't know the area, a polite response is usually something like, "Oh, okay," or "I'm afraid I don't know it."
And as the listener, it's always good to respond politely, even if you have no idea where they're talking about. Definitely. Just a simple, oh, really? Or okay shows you're listening and engaged.
And a great way to keep the conversation flowing, as always, is to return the question.
Yes, asking how about you is always good. Or more specifically, where do you live?
Putting the stress on you.
Yeah, stressing the you makes it clear you're bouncing the question back politely and want to hear about them. It keeps the conversation balanced.
And the underlying purpose of asking where someone lives often goes back to that idea of finding connections, doesn't it? Looking for shared experiences.
Absolutely. It's fundamentally an attempt to discover if you have any shared experiences related to the area. Perhaps you go to the same coffee shop or use the same park or know the same people or have opinions on the local restaurants. Finding that common ground is a really fundamental part of building rapport.
The advice on making polite follow-up comments here seems really important too.
Yes, definitely. If you do know the area they live in, it's very polite to try and make a positive comment about it.
Like
something general and positive, like, oh, that's a really nice neighborhood, or the park over there is beautiful, or I hear that area has some great restaurants. Keep it positive.
And there's a very strict, non-negotiable rule about what not to do.
Absolutely critical. Never, ever say anything negative about the area someone tells you they live in.
Even if you think it's true.
Even if you genuinely believe it to be true. Do not say things like, oh, really? I hear that area is dangerous, or isn't that the place with the really high crime rate? Or, oh, the traffic there is terrible.
Why is that so bad?
Because it's incredibly impolite. It can make the other person feel defensive or judged or uncomfortable. It puts them in an awkward position. Just keep any negative opinions to yourself.
So if you can't think of anything positive,
Just make a neutral comment like, oh, okay, or I see, or just move the conversation on, but avoid negativity about their home turf at all costs.
that's really excellent advice. Nobody wants to hear bad things about where they've chosen to live. Okay, next up in our getting to know you sequence, education. Where someone went to school or university.
Yeah, another common topic, particularly among adults once they're past that stage, and it can be a good conversation starter.
And the question you'll typically hear for someone who is, say, over 22 or so, and likely finished with their primary degree is in the past tense, right?
Yes, because it refers to an event that is completed for most adults you're meeting socially. The standard question is, where did you go to college?
Where did you go to college? Okay. And in American English, the word choice can vary slightly here.
That's right. In the US, the word school is often used informally to mean college or university, specifically in this context of higher education.
So you might hear,
You might frequently hear someone ask, where did you go to school? Oh, meaning exactly the same thing as where did you go to college? It can confuse learners sometimes, but in this context, school usually means higher ed.
good clarification. But in British or maybe European English, the term is different again.
Correct. The more common term there is university. So the question would typically be, where did you go to university?
Okay, so college or school, mainly US, and university, more Europe and elsewhere. How do you answer this question naturally?
The simple structure is usually, I went to university, name and city. I went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, or I went to McGill University in Montreal.
What if the city is already part of the university's name, like University of Chicago?
Good point. If the city is explicitly in the name, like Oxford University or Kyoto University or University of Toronto, you might add the country instead of the city for broader clarity, especially if talking to someone international.
So I went to Oxford University in England.
Exactly. Or I went to Tokyo University in Japan, though often just the famous university name is enough.
Got it. And just like with jobs or locations, it's polite to respond when someone tells you where they studied.
Yes, show you're listening. A simple, oh really, is always fine, especially if you don't recognize the name of the institution.
And if you do recognize it,
If you do recognize it, you might say something like, oh, I've heard of that school. Or maybe if it's well known, wow, that's a really famous university.
keeps the conversation moving. Now, there's a potentially sensitive situation here. What if someone didn't go to college or university?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that response politely?
Yes, this requires a bit of care and sensitivity. The most important thing is to avoid sounding surprised or judgmental or dismissive in any way.
Your tone of voice is key.
Your tone is absolutely key. A simple, neutral, oh, really, works perfectly well as an initial response.
And maybe follow up.
Yes, you could follow up with a question that shows you're still interested in their path, whatever it was. Something like, oh, really? Did you go straight into a job after high school? Or, okay. What did you do after graduating high school then?
That shows you're acknowledging their different path without making assumptions or judgments about it.
Exactly. It respects their journey and keeps the focus on learning about them.
That's a great tip frame. A follow-up that respects their experience. And speaking of follow-ups, what's a good way to keep the conversation going after they mention where they went to school, assuming they did?
The most common and very natural follow-up question is to ask about their field of study.
Which sounds like
What did you study? Or, particularly common in the U.S., what was your major?
major, right? That's the common term in the U.S. for your main area of study in college.
Yes. Asking about their major or field of study is great because it invites them to talk about something specific they likely spend a lot of time on and something they might be enthusiastic or knowledgeable about. It's a very natural extension of the conversation about their education.
Makes sense. Lets them share expertise. Okay, we've asked about their background, their work, their free time, their education. It feels like we're getting to know someone quite well by now.
Building a picture, yeah.
But there's one piece missing, perhaps the most basic, but sometimes, somehow, the trickiest. Their name.
Ah, yes. The fundamental question, and another one where the standard textbook version is almost never used in natural, casual conversation.
You learn, what is your name? Probably on day one of English class.
Work is right up there with hello.
But asking it that way, just directly, what is your name? Especially when you've just met someone. Feels a bit too blunt, maybe. Too interrogative for a relaxed social interaction.
It really does. In English, much like in many other cultures, those initial interactions often favor a slightly more indirect approach when asking for personal information, like a name.
Was your name feels like you're, I don't know, filling out a form or checking a list.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like starting a friendly chat.
So if you don't ask, what is your name?
Uh-huh.
What is the natural, polite way to find out someone's name when you're meeting them for the first time?
Okay, the easiest and by far the most common method is actually not to ask a question at all.
Really? Then how do you find out?
You introduce yourself first, you volunteer your name.
Ah, okay. Just give your own name proactively.
Exactly. You initiate the name exchange by offering your name first. The simple self-introduction is just, "Hi, I'm your name," or "Hello, I'm your name."
So you walk up maybe after a brief initial greeting like, how's it going? And then you say, by the way, I'm David. Or just, hi, I'm David. But how do you then prompt them to give their name? What's the crucial addition to make that happen?
The crucial bit, the little tag that invites reciprocation, is adding "and" and "you" at the end.
Ah.
So, "Hi, I'm David and you," or "Hello, I'm Sarah and you." That little "and you" clearly signals that you have introduced yourself and you are now politely inviting them to do the same.
That and you is like the conversational hook. It prompts them to respond with, oh, hi, David, I'm Maria, or nice to meet you, Sarah, I'm Mark.
Exactly.
That is such a practical, smooth, natural way to handle it. Much better than the direct question.
It works beautifully in almost any casual or semi-casual setting. It's the standard way.
Okay, now for the moment that fills everyone, absolutely everyone with dread. You've met someone before. You might have even talked for quite a while last time. But right now, in this moment, their name has completely vanished from your brain. Blanked.
Oh, that sinking feeling. We've all been there.
What's the polite way to recover from that situation? What does the material suggest?
First rule, don't panic. It really does happen to everyone. The most polite and generally recommended approach is simply to apologize briefly and ask for the name again.
So, just admit you forgot.
Pretty much. Trying to hide it or guess or avoid using their name can sometimes make things even more awkward if you get it wrong or seem evasive.
Okay. And there's a specific phrase for this that's much, much better than just blurting out, what's your name again?
Yes, there is a key polite phrase, and it makes a big difference. The phrase is, "I'm sorry, what was your name again?"
Okay, let's break that down. I'm sorry, what was your name again? Why does that specific phrase work so well? It sounds like it has three key differences from the basic, what's your name? First part, I'm sorry.
Right. Starting with "I'm sorry" is important. It acknowledges the minor social slip-up, the faux pas of having forgotten. It's a small apology, a recognition that you're asking for information you ideally should remember. That little bit of politeness goes a long, long way.
Okay, makes sense. Second, and this seems really subtle but crucial, using the past tense was instead of is. So what was your name, not what is your name? Why is that specific verb tense so important?
This is the really clever, socially intelligent part of the phrase. Using was subtly implies that you did know their name at some point in the past. It signals that you remember meeting them, you remember learning their name initially, but you just can't recall it right now. This makes a huge psychological difference.
So?
Because it shows you haven't forgotten the person or the previous interaction. You've only forgotten a specific piece of data about the name itself. It feels much less dismissive or forgetful than "what is your name?" Which could almost imply you're meeting them for the very first time, like you don't remember them at all.
Wow, okay. So was FERS confirms you remember the connection, even if the specific detail is temporarily lost. That makes perfect sense. It really softens the blow significantly.
Absolutely. It helps preserve the rapport you hopefully established when you first met them.
Okay, and the third difference is adding the word again at the very end. What was your name again?
Yes, adding again reinforces the idea that this is a repeated request for information you previously possessed. It underscores the notion that you aren't learning their name for the first time right now. You're just needing a reminder because you can't recall it again in this moment.
So the full phrase, I'm sorry, what is your name again?
Yeah.
It's the perfect combination. The apology, acknowledging the past meeting was, and reinforcing the reminder aspect. Again.
Exactly. It's polite, it's effective, and it minimizes potential awkwardness beautifully.
And can you use this phrase pretty much anywhere? Formal, informal?
Yes, it's generally appropriate in almost any situation where you've met someone before but blanked on their name, whether it's relatively informal, social chat, or even a slightly more formal work context. It's a very safe bet.
That's incredibly useful. The material also gives a good practice tip for actually remembering names once you learn them or relearn them.
Yes, using the name in conversation.
How does that work?
Well, it's noted that particularly in the US, it's quite common and generally considered polite, or maybe a sign of interest and engagement, to use the person's name periodically throughout the conversation.
Not just once at the beginning.
Right, weaving it in naturally, it helps personalize the interaction. And crucially for you, the learner trying to remember, it helps solidify the name in your memory through active recall and use.
So instead of just asking, say, what do you do for fun, you could maybe say, Sarah, what do you do for fun?
Exactly. Or you could put it at the end, what do you do for fun?
Mark. Or maybe in a response. That's really interesting, Sarah.
Yes. Weaving the name naturally into questions or comments can make the conversation feel more direct and connected. And, as a bonus, it gives you those little micro-practice moments to recall and actually say the name out loud.
Is there a danger of overdoing it, though?
Yes, there's a caution about that. Using someone's name too many times in a single short conversation can start to sound unnatural, maybe a bit strange or even overly intense, like a salesperson technique.
Right, don't sound creepy.
Exactly. But using it just a few times, naturally, especially when asking direct questions or responding directly to something they've said, is generally very well received. And honestly, people usually like hearing their own name used appropriately. It shows you're paying attention to them specifically.
Those are fantastic tips for handling names, like getting them in the first place and recovering when you forget. Okay, last but definitely not least in our initial conversation sequence, staying connected. How do you politely ask for contact information?
Right, another area where the most direct textbook question might not always be the smoothest or most appropriate approach in reality.
The textbook might teach, what's your phone number? Useful information, certainly. But the material points out a couple of reasons why just asking that directly might be problematic sometimes.
It does. First, depending on the context, how well you know the person, maybe even gender dynamics, it can sound a bit too direct or forward.
A bit abrupt again.
Yeah, it might feel like a slightly abrupt request for quite personal data, especially if you've only just met. Second, people's preferred methods of contact have really diversified.
That's true. It's not just about phone numbers anymore.
Not at all. Not everyone relies primarily on phone calls or even text messages these days. Many people might prefer email for certain things, or connecting on social media platforms, or using specific chat apps like WhatsApp or Signal.
So asking only for a phone number kind of limits your options, and it might feel too personal too soon anyway.
Yeah.
What are some better, maybe more indirect alternatives?
Well, a slightly softer way to ask specifically for a phone number is to phrase it as, could I get your number? Or can I have your number?
Could I get? Or can I have? How does starting with that phrase soften the request compared to what is?
Using could I get or can I have frames the request more as a question about possibility or convenience for the other person. It's less of a direct demand for the information, what is it, and more of a polite inquiry, is it possible for me to have it? It feels less demanding, less direct, and therefore is often perceived as more polite.
Okay, that makes sense. It's less entitlement, more request. And it's easy to adapt that same structure for asking about email, right?
Absolutely. To ask for an email address, you use the exact same polite structure. Could I get your email address? Or can I have your email address?
Simple swap.
Simple swap. And it's worth noting, as the material suggests, asking for an email address is generally seen as slightly less personal or intrusive than asking for a phone number in many contexts. So it can be a good alternative if a phone number feels a bit too direct for the situation.
What about connecting via social media or messaging apps? It's so common now, especially maybe with younger people or in certain professional circles.
Yes, the material definitely acknowledges that. Many people, perhaps particularly younger generations, or for networking, might prefer connecting via platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram. The list goes on.
So why do you ask about those?
The simple standard way to ask about these is, are you on service name?
Straightforward. Like, are you on Instagram? Or if it's maybe a professional networking event, are you on LinkedIn?
Exactly. Okay. Or are you on WhatsApp?
Yep.
You just name the specific platform you're interested in connecting on.
Okay, so if someone asks you for contact info, using one of these more polite phrases, how do you typically answer? If they say, could I get your number? Or could I get your email address?
Well, the simplest affirmative answer is just, sure.
Sure.
You can then follow up by giving the full information. Sure, my phone number is. Or, sure, my email address is. Or a slightly more concise version is very common. Sure, it's number mail.
Sure, it's 555-1234. Or sure, it's name@email.com. And if they ask about a specific platform, like, are you on Facebook? How do you answer that?
That's usually a straightforward yes I am or no I'm not.
Okay, if you say yes I am to one of those are you on questions, what often happens next? What's the logical follow-up?
Well, if you confirm you're on the platform, they will likely follow up by asking how to actually find or connect with you on that platform.
Ah, right.
They might ask, okay, great, what's your username? Or how can I find you on there? Or should I look you up?
Makes sense. Need the details. Now, what if you say, no, I'm not, to a specific social media question? Maybe, are you on Twitter? And you say no, but you do still want to stay in touch using a different method. How do you handle that?
This is important if you want to keep the connection open. You need to signal your willingness to connect via another channel.
So you say,
You'd say something like, no, I'm not on Twitter, but my email address is. Or, no, I don't really use Facebook much, but you can find me on LinkedIn if you like. Or, no, but here's my phone number if you want to text. You offer an alternative method.
that's a great way to redirect the conversation to a connection method you actually use and clearly show you're still interested in staying in touch, despite not using that specific platform.
Exactly. It keeps the door open.
And there's one final, really key piece of advice about the timing of asking for contact info, which feels very intuitive socially, but is worth stating explicitly.
Absolutely critical. Cannot stress this enough. People are generally far, far more comfortable and willing to share personal contact details like phone numbers or private social media handles after you have talked for a while.
Oh, right at the beginning.
Definitely not right at the beginning. You need to have established some level of rapport, some comfort, some connection first.
So don't walk up, say, hi, I'm David, and you. Get their name, and then immediately say, cool, could I get your number?
Please don't do that. Asking for contact information too early in the interaction before you've really chatted much can feel intrusive or awkward or pushy or even raise suspicion about your motives.
Yeah, can feel a bit weird.
The key is to spend some time actually talking first. Get to know the person a little bit, using all those other phrases we've discussed. Talk about what they do for fun, where they live, maybe where they went to school, before you even think about asking for contact info. Build that connection first.
That makes perfect sense. It's about respecting personal boundaries and building a little bit of trust before you ask for something that feels more private.
It's a fundamental social grace, really. It applies in any language, any culture. Get to know someone a bit first.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the very first hello or how's it going or what's up, all the way through to figuring out how to stay in touch.
We really have.
We've tried to peel back the layers on these really common everyday questions to see how native speakers actually handle them in real life.
Yeah, moving away from just the standard textbook answers and into the more natural flow of conversation.
And the recurring theme seems to be that natural, everyday English often favors, well, a bit more indirectness sometimes, and definitely relies on subtle cues and social rituals over just direct, explicit questions.
That's a great summary. Understanding the purpose behind a question. Is it just a polite greeting? Is it genuinely looking for information? Is it trying to find common ground? That understanding is often just as important as understanding the literal words themselves.
We talk about the importance of listening for those little signals, didn't we? Like the ing sound, to know if someone's asking about your job or what you're doing right now.
Crucial difference.
Or using was instead of is when you've unfortunately forgotten someone's name to show you remember them.
Those small details make a big difference in perception. And we also highlighted how much value there is in giving positive, engaged responses.
Yeah, showing interest when someone shares something about their work or their home area or their studies.
And using names appropriately also plays a significant role in building that connection and rapport.
And it's interesting how many of these questions naturally pave the way for others, creating a conversational chain.
Exactly. A question about where you went to college easily leads to talking about your major. Talking about where they live can lead to discussing favorite local spots or shared experiences.
And the simple act of asking a question often results in them asking you the same question back. How about you? Which creates that nice balanced exchange.
It's the give and take of natural conversation.
So for you, the listener, how can you take all of this and actually use it? Well, the next time you have an English conversation, maybe consciously try to use some of these more natural phrases we've talked about.
Yeah, experiment a little. Instead of always defaulting to, how are you? Maybe try, how's it going? And see how it feels.
Or instead of asking, what is your job? Practice saying, what do you do? Notice the difference in how it lands.
And pay attention to how native speakers use these phrases around you. Listen for them in movies, in real life. Which textbook phrases can you perhaps start to phase out in more casual settings?
It's really about making those small, deliberate adjustments to help your spoken English sound more like the English you actually hear spoken every day around you.
And applying these insights won't just help you sound more native, hopefully. It should also help you feel more comfortable and confident navigating those everyday social interactions.
You'll be better equipped to engage in genuine conversation, not just, exchanging basic information like robots.
Exactly.
We've taken a pretty deep dive today into what seem like the fundamental building blocks of initial conversations in English.
The very basics.
But we've uncovered these natural, often less direct ways native speakers actually connect. And they are often different from what you might first learn in a classroom.
But knowing them, using them, is really key to sounding more fluent and building that rapport right from the start.
By focusing on these real-world usages, you're hopefully gaining a powerful shortcut to sounding more natural, feeling more confident, and connecting more genuinely with native English speakers. Right from that very first hello.
That's the goal.
So here's a final thought to consider. If even these simplest, most basic questions for getting to know someone, the questions you probably learned on day one, have such different, nuanced forms and underlying social purposes in natural spoken English compared to the textbook.
What does that imply?
Right. What does that tell us about the rest of the language?
Yeah.
About maybe more complex interactions?
What other fundamental aspects of spoken English might be operating with their own subtle social roles, their own preferred phrasing, that aren't immediately obvious from grammar books?
What other simple things might you be saying or doing that are technically correct according to the rules, but just subtly unnatural in practice?
The journey to truly sounding natural in another language often involves looking beyond just the grammar and the vocabulary.
Important as they
To
are.
understand the social and cultural currents that shape how people actually talk to each other every day.
So, keep observing, keep listening, keep practicing, and keep digging deeper into the fascinating, sometimes confusing, but always rewarding world of real spoken English.
There are always more layers to uncover.